Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Well, I'm good. I have a kid home from school today, so things are a little bit different. You know how you get in a
Yep.
routine and then they're home and you're like, "What? You want lunch at 11:58? What? No." Oh my gosh. So we're going to hit broadcast in a second, but let me say this to you real quick. My mom, you're meeting with my mom in May.
Yes.
She's a case. So,
Okay.
yeah, she's got a lot going on, but she is 100% committed to doing whatever you need her to do. And it's been a really, really, she's like in a state of depression right now from the journey she's on with this rheumatoid arthritis. So
All right.
when you see her, I know how gentle you can be. She needs some kid gloves because she's been through a lot. So
Okay.
just thank you so much for
You're
being it. Yeah.
welcome.
I told her if anybody
Has
can
she
help you,
read
she
my
can.
Have she read my book yet? Because that's the place to start.
She probably, I don't know, whoever your assistant is, if she told her to get the book, she probably did. But if not, then I'll let her know.
Yeah, make sure she does before she sees me because it'll so help with, like cutting down on explanation and stuff like that.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll get her set. And then I've been leading her. So she's been paleo, keto, like playing with all this stuff. So she's got a lot of relief from things, but I can't help with this part. It's too close to her,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the book will go into all those other things that she needs, which is the emotional, mental, like all of that piece. So
Yeah. Okay. She's done EMDR and stuff too. So I'll let her tell you her story. That's for
all
her
right,
side of the
good.
fence. All right, let's do it. We're just going to roll like we usually do.
All right.
We'll do a sound check here and, I'll make sure. All right, here we go. Lorianne and Tracy. Hi guys. I feel like I just saw some of you 50 minutes ago on another training. So welcome, and let me know if you can hear us. Once I get the go-ahead from you guys, I'm going to do a proper introduction of Dr. Keesha, and we're going to get into a topic that I am I'm just so excited about this topic because I think it's such a powerful thing. So, okay, we're good. Awesome. Thank you, Brandy. All right, so those of you who are students and members of the mentorship group, you know that Dr. Keesha lives in our expert series of the webinars. So go back and listen to the original interview we did over a year and a half ago, I think. But today we are talking about something totally different. Dr. Keesha Yours is an integrative medicine expert, a doctor of sexology, psychotherapist, board certified in functional medicine, and holds an advanced certification Ayurvedic, I can never say that word.
Ayurvedic.
Ayurvedic, and is the founder and medical director of the Academy for Integrative Medicine Health Coach Certification Program. She has been in the medical field for over 30 years, which you cannot possibly be because you look so young. After being diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, she discovered how to reverse autoimmunity using her Freedom Framework method. Dr. Keesha is a popular speaker, including at Harvard and from the TEDx stage, and the best-selling author of Solving the Autoimmune Puzzle, The Woman's Guide to Reclaiming Emotional Freedom and Vibrant Health and Your Libido Story, a workbook for women who want to find, fix, and free their sexual desire. I think we could all use that. You can listen to her Healthy You radio show and find out more about her at drkeesha.com. Welcome, Dr. Keesha. I'm so excited, and I loved your TEDx talk. Yes, so
Thank you.
Yes, we'll be linking to all of those resources for you guys when we do the replay. So no worries about trying to ask where they are. I'll take care of you guys. So today we're talking about the Enneagram. So I am going to let the expert talk about what the Enneagram is, but I just want to preface this with saying that I've taken it 4 times because I'm the skeptic that doesn't believe it could possibly be that accurate. And then it is, and it is, and it is, and it is. So every time but one, it came back as the same number.
Are you a 6?
I am the reformer. I am any.
Oh, you're a 1. Okay.
1. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So go ahead and tell us what the Enneagram is and why it's such an important piece, in my opinion, of helping ourselves and our clients.
All right, great. I teach this in the Academy for Integrative Medicine Health Coach Certification Program because what I want, and it's why I'm excited Carmen invited me into this group to talk about this, is I want health coaches to first understand themselves because, I always think about my program as transpersonal, in that every program ought to be transpersonal, that you're working on yourself so that if you can up-level your own development, then that's the kind of client you attract to you. If you're attracting people that are complaining and resisting and not wanting to do their work, it's because perhaps you haven't learned how to set good boundaries and screen properly, say what you're worth, right? And this all actually boils down to Enneagram. So the Enneagram is this really elegant way of helping you understand the way your ego presents itself into the world and the way it operates. And when you can understand that, then you can allow it to shift to the side so that you're not presenting with your ego all the time, because that always just gets messy and it's no fun to work with people that are always having their ego in front of them. So let's boil back to the beginning here. Ennea in Greek actually means 9. Gram means picture. So Enneagram is a picture of 9 different ways that humans are motivated to get their needs met in the world. So as children, that's our whole thing, is we need to get our needs met. And we start reading our environment, our caregivers, the people that we're in life with, and we start trying to figure out like who they are, what they're about, so that we can get our needs met. So basically your Ennea type is your manipulation type. It's the way that you manipulate your environment to be loved and respected and be kept safe, right? Approved of. So it's one you want to let go of. You don't want to land on a type and say, oh, that's who I am, because then in fact, that's who your ego is. So this is a really actually quite a spiritual practice. And that's the way I approach it. A lot of people don't talk about it the way I do, but what I really want for health coaches is to be very spiritually actualized, so that when you get the inevitable troll that, that is saying something bad about you, or you can't help somebody, you don't take it on as your cross to bear, because you're not responsible for other people, right?
Yes.
And so the more that you can understand where your ego is operating in that, the more that you can let that go aside and just come from your higher self, the one that knows you're whole and complete and perfect as you are, and that you're a work in progress, and so is everybody else that you're working with. So it's a really beautiful way of helping you to self-actualize, to get up there on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yes.
So I want to go through all the 9 types. Is that what you want me to do now, Carmen?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. So the way that the Enneagram is presented is in a geometrical design, and it's got a triangle in the center, and then it's got these lines. It's a circle. And so are you going to give a handout or something? I can send you over handouts, Carmen, if you want.
You can. That would be great. So it will tie into what you're talking about. Yeah,
absolutely. So you guys will have some handouts then that I give to my students. So the way that you want to think about this then is, it's not a personality test that's pigeonholing you into one little hole. It's actually very dynamic, very 3-dimensional. So when you think about these different types, you're going to think about the energy that's motivating them to take action. Okay, so number 1 on there is going to be the one that Carmen is. It's the reformer or the perfectionist. And most people that are 1s don't want to believe it. They don't like it. It doesn't, it's like, I'm not a perfectionist. Are you kidding me? Do you know how imperfect I am? Because they have this bar that's set so high for themselves that they think, oh, I'm nowhere near that. I couldn't possibly be a perfectionist. And usually when I type someone as a 1, they resist it for a while. You took the Enneagram test 4 times? This can't possibly be true.
Yes, and I knew I was a perfectionist, but I was hoping that I would somehow be proved that it was not a bad thing to be,
It's not. That's the other thing, is that these Ennea types are just your ego strategy's voice. Okay, it's just your voice into the world from an ego state. And I'm going to go through what that means here in a minute. So the reformer is the one that is kind of black and white. It wants things to go a certain way. Like there's a right and there's a wrong. And when people aren't following the right way, they get a little upset about it. And when you're young, it'll manifest even more. When you're getting older, I'm 53 years old. My Ennea type doesn't trigger me any longer because I've done a lot of this work. And so when, the perfectionism will also start to soften, right? As you get older and you start seeing that, oh, this doesn't really work. And right. I can't make everybody conform to one rule set or law set or, right? So the 1s are usually, there's an energy about them. And with all 9 types, there's an energy about us, even the way we dress. So interesting. The way we express anger, the way that we speak with one another, the way we communicate. So 1s are generally very put together. And they're very thoughtful about what they say. They generally don't feel safe to express anger. And so that anger will go into their bodies. So I see a lot of ones in my practice because they're the ones that are about self-improvement, and they see, oh, I'm doing something wrong. I need to learn how to do better, right? And so they usually like to learn a lot for self-improvement.
This is like a therapy appointment.
Well, we're on the one, so we'll move off the one now.
Yeah.
And then the 2 is the caregiver. And with the caregiver, this is the one, their motivation, instead of to do right and wrong, the 2 is all about emotional connection. So the 2 wants to connect to everybody, and they usually are the helpers, okay? So I'm a 2, and 2s look really good on paper. They look very pretty on paper, but it's one of the most insidious ones. Because it looks so good on paper, 2s have some pride, like, oh, I help people. I can actually tell what you need before you even know that you need it. And in fact, I am highly intuitive and I'm even psychic. That's a 2. And so 2s will be intrusive in their helping. They'll actually go up to strangers half the time and say, I can help you with that. Did you know that that's, and it's really obnoxious. And 2s are always rescuing people, and they're putting other people's agendas before them, and they don't take care of themselves. They also wind up in my office. They are oftentimes overweight. You'll barely see a 1 that's overweight. 2s, you'll see overweight a lot. And it's because they're so busy taking care of everyone that they don't take care of themselves. So the way that they dress is oftentimes, there are three different kinds of subtypes within this. And so they'll often be more seductive. They try to seduce people to like them, to approve of them. So they're very friendly. They're the consummate people pleaser people. So they look great on the outside. They're compassionate, but the insidious part is they're not really compassionate. What they're doing is selfish and mercenary, but you can't tell, because they're smiling at people, they're being kind to people, they're doing, like, throwing over their own agenda to help everybody else. But what it is a manipulation tactic so that they get their needs met, so that you will like them, so that you will approve of them. So when I learned about this 2 behavior, I started dismantling it. I used to keep track of everybody's birthday. I used to keep track of, everybody.
Oh my gosh.
I would give gifts like crazy. And my life was just so busy taking care of everybody and being thoughtful. And so when I learned all this, I stopped doing it for a good year. I became an absolute bitch, really, in my book, like what I would have called that, because I just decided if I'm not motivated to be nice for a selfless reason, as in I don't need an outcome for it, then I'm not going to be nice. And I'm going to see how that feels, right? Just to be like, oh, I don't actually feel like being nice right now. So for about a year, I did that. And then I started rebuilding the way I am in the world from a non-Enneatype structure. Every Enneatype has to do this. They have to let go of their strategy. It takes about a year of constant integration, and then rebuild an infrastructure that's authentic into the world. Okay?
It can be painful to disassemble because because you're facing the reality of yourself, and then you're saying, okay, this hasn't worked for me. And you have to admit that that's not working for you, to be perfectionistic and how it's being portrayed to your children and your family and so on. That's a hard lesson to learn, but if you can learn it, then you can get rid of it. Right.
Right. You can let it go aside, and then you can call on it when you want it. The best place to be a perfectionist is in what you're doing for a living. But then you don't want to actually be parented by a perfectionist, right? That's not fun. You don't want to be married to a perfectionist. That's also not fun, because they feel like you're always trying to improve them and they're not good enough, right? So that's an important place where you want to let it go or bring it in when it's useful, right? So I can be super compassionate even when I don't feel like it, when it's useful now. And I can recognize that that's what I'm doing, so I don't require something back for it. That's important, right? Yeah. So what I do for a living is important for me to be compassionate and nice. And no matter how I feel, to act like I am in a good space and kind. But I don't do it and expect someone to be kind back.
Yes.
That's a big key, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's what I want you to hear. And then threes are the achievers. They're success-oriented people, and they are oftentimes what is said about them is they cut corners to be successful, and they throw people under the bus to get to the top. So these are super achiever people that name drop, and it's going to be, that was all stereotypical, everything I've been saying. So there are variations inside of each of these that we'll circle back around to. Threes tend to be type A, self-drivers, right? Marriages don't tend to be very healthy, because they're trying to get to the top. And they think, okay, I'll pay attention to that when I achieve what I need to achieve. But then that level of achievement keeps going out, just like with the one's perfectionism, right?
Right.
So it's important to recognize when you have that, because it can just drive you to your grave, and you're never satisfied or recognize that you actually have succeeded in some modicum of, level that you could be happy with.
I know a couple of those people. Yes.
You know a whole lot of those people, Carmen.
Do
Our
I?
space is filled with them.
Well,
all you have to do is drop into my
That's true. That's true.
Mostly threes. Okay.
Yes, I would agree.
So yeah. And that's the way it is in corporate environments for the people that are at the top. It's the way it is with politicians for the people at the top. The cream of the crop in any kind of place is usually going to be dominated by threes. So that's a really, twos are often the power behind the throne. Ones are busy making up the systems, and threes are running out to the front to get in the spotlight.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yes, you just described it like a relationship that's been going on for like 3 or 4 months, right, for me.
Yes,
like
there it
all
is.
3 of those pieces, I could now type them just from what you just said.
Yes. And it's so cool, because then if you can move out of a place of judging it, you can say, oh, so that's what's happening, right?
Yes, yes.
I had a big 3 diss me at a conference a few weeks ago, and I so didn't take it personally. My name wasn't big enough to hang out with, right? And I was just like, I got it. I got where you're at, bro.
Yeah.
And then, turned around and talked to somebody else and had a great connection, right?
Yes.
And so if you can understand Enneatypes and what drives people, you can set good boundaries and not have expectations that they're going to be different than they are. And then you can enter in with eyes wide open to relationships and know what to expect, and not then get hurt or disappointed because you understand it. Now, the more awake people are, the less this is going to drive them. And this is not going to be where they operate from, right? All right. Okay. So Corinne's saying, Corinne, thank you. I've been distressed ever since learning my type. Yes, I know. When you land on the type that you are, it's distressing, because you see all the shadow part of it and you go, oh, you mean the strategy I've had my entire life is actually a manipulative thing?
Yeah, but we all feel that way no matter what number you are.
Exactly.
You're going to find those distressing pieces of you. Because at first, the one time it came back as I was an 8, I was like, oh, and then it was like, no, you're a 1, you're a 1, you're a 1. And I'm like, but I wanted to be an 8. But a minute ago, I was stressed by the 8.
I thought I was a 7 for about 6 months, and I loved it. And so if you find a type that you actually land on and you actually like it, you're not on the right type usually.
I'm married to a 7, and so I know what you're saying. Who doesn't want to be a 7? But there are downfalls to that too.
7s get together a lot. And we'll talk about couplings in a few minutes. So the 4 then, moving around the Enneagram, the 4 is the romantic. And the romantic is the one that is unique in their own minds. They don't think anyone else can get them. And they're the artists. It's Vincent van Gogh, it's Monet, it's most artists, musical, otherwise, right? They tend to dress very flamboyantly and in a unique manner. And they are the ones that are most depressive on the Enneagram. They will dive way down deep into feelings and emotions. And they know that at the bottom of that emotional well comes the pearls, the riches that they then make art with. So they tend to not feel too badly about going into those emotional ups and downs, because it's like, it's their terrain. They get it. Where a 2 that drives, or a 1 that goes down into that well, they get scared because they're like, oh my gosh, I might not ever come out of this. This isn't a place I want to be. The 4 feels more comfortable there, knowing it's going to pass.
And that's where they pull their creativity from.
That's where they pull their creativity from, right? That's where the art comes from. And so And they're very beauty centered, beauty oriented, and they tend to look at with envy at what other people have, but not jealousy. So in other words, they want what other people have. Things tend to not be enough for them, but they don't resent other people for having it. So there's a distinction, right, between envy and jealousy. That's their vice.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the 5, there's a little gap at the bottom of the Enneagram, and then we hop over from these heart types that I've been talking about. The 2, the 3, and the 4 are the heart types. Then we hop over and we're going into the head types. They're more mentally motivated. So the 5 is the hermit. The 5 is the one that's the observer on the Enneagram. I'm married to a 5. 2s and 5s get together a lot because the 2s are more very emotionally connected and 5s are very not emotionally connected. So spiritually, they're called the holy relationship because they have something to teach each other in a huge way, right? The 5 teaches the 2 how to have to take care of themselves because they're not going to.
Yes.
And it makes them have to become more introspective, to dive deep and find that worth from within. And the 2 teaches them how to come out of their self-centric place and begin to notice the patterns and the people around them. So it's a really great relationship. So the 5 is very knowledge oriented. They're kind of like an Aspergerian. My oldest son has Asperger's. And one of the things that's true about Asperger's is when they love a subject, they dive deep down into it. Well, 5s are like that too. And my husband is a 5 and he is a meditation master. So he lived for several months in a cave in the Himalayas by himself. The 5s are usually the renunciates of the world. There's one type of 5s. There are 3 subtypes for every one of these types. That is called a 1-to-1, and they like to be in relationship, and they like to be in relationship at their own terms. So in other words, they're kind of like cat people. They come up to you when they want you, and then they don't want you to come near them if they don't want you. Okay. So that's a 5. And they tend to be like a little more reclusive. You won't see 5s very often in a coaching program. That's not really their wheelhouse. You're going to see them as the authors. Stephen King is a 5. He has a strong 4 wing with the art piece, and then he lives up in the forest and writes, and has his little turret. And so that's the way. My husband is an author. He's written a million books. That's exactly, they like to be isolated. And then the 6, the next door neighbor, is the loyal skeptic. And you said, I'm a skeptic. So that's why I said, are you 6?
Yeah.
The loyal skeptic comes from a place where they're driven by fear. And whenever anyone reads about the 6 on paper, they don't want to be a 6 because it's so blatantly fear driven. And 6s, their biggest motivation is for security. And it's not necessarily financial security. It could be physical security. It could be a warm 6, one of those subtypes. They look very much like a 2, but they're motivated from different reasons. The 2 wants to be friendly for emotional connection. The 6 wants to be friendly from a place of, are you safe? Will you keep me safe? Right?
Okay. Yep.
And so they look very much like a 2. They're very friendly and they're very warm. The other kinds of subtypes of the 6s can be like Woody Allen. And then there's another type of 6 that's the snowboarder that gets dropped out of the helicopter. They're called counterphobic, and they will not even acknowledge they have fear. They live their lives in huge risk to counter their phobias. So all the 6s look really different from each other. So all those different subtypes. Yeah. So a 6 is hard. Like sometimes it's hard to say a 6 is a 6 is a 6 because that's not actually accurate. But the underlying theme is the need for security and the fear piece.
Okay.
So, and the 6s, they don't trust and they won't believe you as if you're coaching them until they do trust you. And then you're on the inner circle, like Meet the Fockers.
Yep.
Robert De Niro's character is a 6, right?
Yes.
There's the circle and you're either in it or you're on the outside of it. And
yes.
Right.
That's a great example. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There, you can find the archetypes in the media. I actually teach a class about characters that are in books and theater and movies. And it's a real interesting one because you can find them. So staying on that theme, the 7 is Peter Pan.
Yes,
7,
it is.
Yeah. The 7 never wants to grow up. The 7 is distracted constantly by bright, shiny objects, wants to learn everything. They're called the epicure, which means they just want to know everything and they want to suck the marrow out of the bones of life, and they will, contrary, like the very opposite of the 4, they will not feel emotions if they can help it. Like,
oh my gosh, yes.
To them, it's actually dangerous to feel sad, because if they stick their little toe in a real emotion, there might be a swamp creature that sucks them in and they'll never get out. So usually 7s were raised by more emoting parents, a parent that they looked at and thought, oh, that doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel safe. And I'm not going to be like that. And so if you're a Debbie Downer around a 7, they will smile and be friendly, and then they will never call you again. Mm-hmm. So, they tend to leave relationships easily, unless they're more aware. Mm-hmm. They tend to not finish projects very well.
Oh my gosh. Yep.
Resemble anyone you know?
Yes. The project part. I'm wondering if my kid's a 7. The project part. I'm like, why is there a half this? He leaves a bite on his plate of every meal. 1 bite of whatever he's eating, and I'm like, are you a 7? Because like it's incomplete project city around here. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
So
keep
7s
going.
are a lot of fun to be around. They're the life of the party. And 1s are connected to 7. There's a line, the line on the Enneagram connects you. That's why they get married a lot. And the 1, as their connection to 7, usually will become a 7 on vacation. Yes. So a 1, their partner will usually try and get them on vacation as often as possible, because they're more fun and they're not as bullied by their task list. You know, the 1 has an inner critic that never goes to sleep. And oftentimes it's on vacation that their critic will take a vacation.
So, oh my gosh. Yes. I mean, we always say, like, get out of mama's way when a vacation is coming. Cause I'm like, pet sitter notes here, all 7 pages. Doors locked here, keys here, laundry done, sheets changed. And then I get in the car and I'm like, woo, like on, but it takes making sure that all the things are done.
All the ducks in a row.
They can't stand to be around me. And then we get in the car and they're like, is she good? I'm like, we're good. Let's go. I don't know what everybody's so panicked about, and then I'm good until I get home. That is right. Absolutely true. That's what I'm telling you. Like everything you're saying is me to a T.
Yeah. Because 1s are hyper organized. And so, if there's chaos around them, they can't manage it and they want to organize it all. But on vacation, they understand that it's not their place to organize and they can just let that go.
Yep.
So, yeah. So that's the 7. And then the 8 is the protector. And the 8 has the biggest anger and energy and usually body type of anyone else on the Enneagram. They tend to be bigger people. They fill up spaces and they're very intimidating, and they hate that about themselves, because other Enneatypes are usually quite intimidated by 8s because of their big energy, and they're very direct and very blunt, and they want other people to be that way with them too. So if you have someone in your life that's super blunt and super direct, if you just can pull the 8 energy that's in you, that you're not driven by it, you can find all 9 types inside of you. You can nudge into it and bring it in and just go toe to toe with an 8 in your life, then they actually will respect you. They like it. They go, oh, they want to know where you're at. They hate it when people are passive aggressive. They can't stand it when you sugarcoat everything. They just want to know, and they want to know where they stand.
That's why I thought I was an 8, because I'm so much that way, but that must be me just channeling that part of me. Because interesting you said that. You're so good at this description, because many times the testimonials I get from what I do with my coaches is, I love that you're so direct and blunt. You're straightforward. Carmen's a no bullshitter. She's right. She'll tell you like it is. And so that's why I was like, maybe I'm an 8. And that's just a part of who I am as a 1. I think that I can tap into that. Right?
Yeah, it is.
Cool. That's very cool.
I actually am like that too. I'm very blunt. But I didn't used to be when I was younger. And so it's I respect it and I recognize it in 8, and I go, oh yeah, you don't want to be that people pleaser person, right? You want to let people know where they're at. You want to say what is real, because people need to hear where they stand with you and what's really real, instead of lying through your teeth and then having them turn around and then you know that you haven't been authentic with them. So 8s are protectors, and they usually are in the police force or on stages. There a lot of times 8s are on stages. They're judges and they're lawyers. They're people that want to protect the underdog. They usually have big hearts and big social justice genetics in them, where they're really driven by that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the 9 is the last one, and that's the mediator. And the 9's actually kind of the opposite of the 8. They don't like conflict. They can see all sides of every story. They tend not to want to get in the middle of conflict unless it's to mediate it. And they usually won't take sides. Because they don't like conflict, if they're an unaware 9 and they're not awake yet, they'll bury their head in the sand and let troubles pile up around their butt. And then when they pop their head out, they're like, oh, it's still here.
Yep.
So they do numbing out behaviors. And a lot of our clients are 9s, where they're not getting exactly the results they want, and they just want to, and if stress has been happening at work, then they're the ones that will go get the Ben and Jerry's ice cream oftentimes. 2s will do that too, but 2s and 9s look a lot alike because they put aside their own agenda for someone else. But the 9, you can tell the difference between a 2 and a 9 because 9s tend to dress very nondescript and they don't like to show up at all. So they tend to want to blend into the background. They won't take credit when they've had a good idea. They don't want the attention focused on them. And they're really irritating to be around because they also won't say what they need. They won't say what they want. And they're very passive aggressive in their shadow aspects and super nice people. Always very, very, very nice. So it's a really that their growth edge is to even know what they want. They oftentimes don't. Yeah. So 9s will very often couple with a very strong 8. And they'll be like Batman and Robin. So they're often the sidekick to a stronger personality. So they'll have a best friend that's, a bigger personality or, whatever, a boss that's a bigger personality that they're supporting in the background. That's a 9. And you can usually, so 9s can tell they're 9s because they've never gotten angry more than maybe the number of fingers on their hand. Like they can say, I can count on on my hand how many times in my life I've actually exploded. And the rest of us are like, what?
Yeah. Yesterday, no, last week. Are they also are they also the people that would I've got a specific person in mind, but are they also the people who are like they're not going to express their feelings for fear of what could come from it? Like if they were to get angry, they just kind of keep that, hold it in. And do they tend to have like a lot of conditions and problems and symptoms and things from holding in that? Okay.
And they can also run to overweight because they numb out with TV, food, drugs, a lot of addiction in the 9 world.
Okay.
There's a lot of addiction. There's a lot of addiction in the 6 world too because of the fear, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So there's a lot of food addiction with the 2 because they're emotional eaters and they will turn to food. So each one of them has their own little thing. My husband, when I met him, was completely addicted to meditation. So where you'd think this is a completely healthy habit, he actually needed it to feel okay. Mm-hmm. So every type can have an addictive place where they go, and it'll be driven by their type. It's fascinating. Religion is driven by your type.
Really?
Yeah, there are a lot. If you go to a Buddhist Sangha, 5s and 6s, almost to a T, because they're head types and they love meditating. And so on the other side, the heart types tend to be like Christian or mystics, Sufis, they'll study the Kabbalah. Like it's always the more emotionally connected, heart-centered folks, right?
Okay. Yeah.
The top of the Enneagram, the 8s, the 9s, and the 1s are the body types. And so they tend to feel things in their body more than the others. And there's always an anti-type to each one of those. So as I say that, the 3 is usually not connected to their emotions and connection's not important to them. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the body type up there, 1s tend to be a little disconnected from their bodies, okay, because they're driven by this right and wrong thing.
Right.
And then on the other side, the head type, the 7 is the anti-head type. So it's kind of interesting how it all works. Yeah. So then I told you inside of all those 9 types, there are subtypes just to make it even more exciting.
Right.
And so we have a 1-to-1. It's called a sexual subtype. we have a self-preservation subtype, and then we have a social subtype. And so each one of those will have a different energy, and that's going deeper down the rabbit hole than this piece can give us. But I just want you to know, like I said, all the 6s are very different. So are all the 4s, radically different. And then my daughters, I have 2 daughters, and the 3 of us are all different subtypes of 2s.
Oh, okay.
And we look very different from how we express ourselves into the world. I'm a social 2, which is like, I want everybody's needs to be met. The one-to-one or self-preservation 2 is going to be more Peter Pan, and it's like, take care of me. They're the damsel in distress all the time.
Okay.
And the one-to-one sexual type is going to be antisocial, except when they're one person.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's very interesting how these manifest.
Yeah. See, I think this to me is just so, like, how did this come to be? Like, I've read 4 books on the Enneagram. Okay. The Road Back to You, I thought, was really powerful. We looked with my husband and I, my son, we went to a soccer game in Memphis, a 3.5-hour car ride, and we listened to it on Audible. My son, of course, was in his beat. So he was like, I don't know what y'all are listening to, but we were like, we went ahead to our types, and we were like doing the whole, that's why you're that way, and that's why you're that way, and oh, that makes sense, like the back and forth of it, you know.
That's what you do in the beginning.
You do it, when we first, it was a while back when we started that. But where did this?
It's always like this when you're learning it.
Totally, yes, and it definitely. And then once we really started getting into it, it really turned into this.
Right.
Where we actually use that in conversation. We're like, well, I'm a 1, you know, that's how I am, or. Well, I'm a 7. No, you
can't. A more evolved way of being with the Enneagram is to say, oh, that's a 1-ish behavior I just did, which means that's my ego. So how do I get underneath that now that I have awareness of it and get more authentic, right?
Yes.
So like I'll say to my husband, if we're in conflict now, I'll say, I can see this trigger actually comes from a 2-ish space. So here's what I've noticed about it. Here's what I'm doing with it inside of myself.
Yeah.
And then here's what I desire from you if you're available for that, you know?
Yes.
And so that's a very different way than saying you are, you know, it's like, oh, I have this awareness that actually my ego space is operating right now, and I'm feeling this, and I get it, that it's actually not your fault, but can I request a change in your behavior, you know?
Yes,
so
totally different.
It actually creates a better communication style inside of any relationship, not just marriages. I want to answer some of these questions.
Yeah, go for it.
And so can you have more than one type, Kim asks, and the answer is no. So, you know, you have a motivating place that you come from. I call it, you know, the command central place. If you saw Pixar's movie Inside Out, it's like, whichever one of those little guys, right? It's going to be, that's your command center. And there's going to be a certain theme that all of those little neurotransmitters that were in there are operating from, right? So the little anger guy will go off. If your Enneatype's connection piece or their motivation has been impinged on, right? So for Carmen, it might be that someone's not doing something right, or, you know, like your child's not doing something right that you asked them to do. And, you know, so then your little anger guy will go off for that reason.
Right.
You know, where mine might be if my husband isn't thoughtful about, you know, something that I've asked him to do and he's not thoughtful, then my little red anger guy will go off because I'm so thoughtful for you. How come you can't be thoughtful for me? Right. That's a 2 thing. Yeah. So, right. So your little red angered boy will go off for very different reasons, and it will depend on your motivation. Now, that being said, remember I said this is your command center for your ego. It's not who you are. You are not your Enneatype. And so I always say, like, when you're younger and you don't understand that this is happening, that it's just a strategy, you wear your strategy like a suit of armor. And if you get pushed into the lake, you're going to drown. So if you can let your Enneatype be like a cloak, right, where it's very loose about you, you can pull it around you if you need it, because we need our ego sometimes to protect us, right? Or you can just let it flow when you don't need it. You can even take it off when it's not required, but you keep it right near you. Right. So you can lean into the energy of all 9 types. Once you can do that at will, you're a very well-rounded human being. And then you also can notice the shadow aspects of each of the types. Then you stop being a judgmental human being, because you just say, oh, that's their Enneatype shadow. Now, I might want to have a boundary with that because I don't really want to be around it because it's hurtful, but I don't have to judge it because I can see I've got my own. I don't need to be judging everyone else's. I've got my own to deal with, right? And so
Yes.
the Enneagram allows you that, and it does create freedom.
Yeah. And
All
I
right.
love that. I love you said that because, after we went through the stages in a very rapid way between my husband and I, when we were doing this and this and this, it became more about, you almost saw the dust settle of our learning experience of it. And then we both kind of retreated into, okay, what does this mean for me? What do I need to be aware of for myself to be more evolved in this place? And one of the things that really helped me to like pay attention to the perfectionistic part of myself was Brene Brown did that, The Gifts of Imperfection. And she was talking about, and it's not word for word and I use it all the time, but how if you are a perfectionistic parent and you're parenting your child, you might as well slip a straitjacket over their head. And that was it for me. I thought, oh my gosh, I think my son was probably 9 maybe when I heard that. And it was a game changer for me. He's 13 now. And I've really had to settle that, not even just for myself or the others around me, but just because I don't want to raise a child who feels he has to be perfect in any way,
Well, my mom's a 1, and I definitely was raised in thinking that I have to be perfect, and some other things contributed to that, but for sure, it definitely influenced that. So,
yeah, my dad was too.
I became very hypervigilant to read her, so that created my 2 strategy. By being kind and thoughtful for her, she rewarded me for that. Now, that's how we get our Enneatype. We're rewarded at a very young age for some behavior we do, and we go, oh, so that's how I get attention. That's how I get love. 5s and 6s often come from a place of trauma because they learn that the world isn't safe, and they have a bullshit meter. The 6s have a bullshit meter that's set very, very high because they can read when people are not authentic really fast. And so that's how they're saying, don't trust you, trust you, And so that it oftentimes comes from trauma. Now, I always say everybody that's intuitive and psychic also had trauma because they had to also be reading that they decided something different, right? So as a 2, I'm very intuitive, but it's not because I have special powers. It's because I had to read my environment so carefully when I was younger. Now, that's not a bad thing, right? I always say trauma is not bad. It's actually the spiritual gymnasium's weight that's being put in for your character to learn, right? And get stronger. So, but it does develop your Enneatype. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Repeat what you meant about awake people. Okay, great. So awake people means awareness of your own shadow, where you're not blaming everything else outside of you for your reality. You're more awake when you understand that you are fully your author and that all reality is based on the way you perceive it, and that you're actually the one that you can't control the environment around you. You can only control you. So then that means you're taking responsibility. So that's what I mean by awake. Now here's from Jennifer. She says, I'm 5'2" and an 8, but very blunt and direct. And when I mean by big body, what I mean is like big energy. It's like your body becomes big because your energy field around you is big. So I don't know if that resonates with you, Jennifer. The best book that you can suggest to study Enneagram personalities. I actually really love a very thin book by David Daniels, who just passed away. Actually, he was my teacher. He was a psychiatrist out of Stanford, and he and Helen Palmer hooked up and created the narrative tradition. And that's the one that I did a 2-year internship with. And that's the one that it really is more about telling your story rather than typing you. Okay. Where it's like, oh, this is an organic process of how to develop in your developmental levels to accelerate it. So instead of typing you and saying like, this is your excuse for why you can't figure out your life. So.
Right. Now, so let's talk a little bit about how you go from the unhealthy part of who you are, operating from the ego side. I know that when I'm moving towards health as a 1, I'm moving towards my husband's number of a 7 is what it says on the chart. That a 1 in a healthy direction goes more towards a 7. spontaneity and excitement and letting go and not worrying so much and all of those things would be a healthier way for me to see things, as opposed to the 7-page dog instructions and locking the doors 65 times. But so can you tell us a little bit about how that looks like to be able to be aware enough to shift into a healthier number, so to speak?
So that's a great question. And you look at what you need for your growth edge. So like, I'm just going to speak from a personal space for a minute. As a 2, not wanting to offend anybody meant that if I offended someone, I could potentially be, not approved of, or not.
Mm-hmm.
2s want everybody to like them, which isn't possible.
No.
It's just an impossibility. And so the growth edge is to move more into that 8, which actually, according to the Enneagram, is your distress place. But to move into that 8, to be able to be blunt, to be able to speak your truth, to be able to say, look, this is what's real for me, instead of trying to figure out someone else's agenda and making it about them. And right.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at the growth edge of what patterns are showing up in your life that are getting in your way and keeping you from living the life that you actually want to have, the relationships you want to have, your relationship with not just people, but with food, with exercise, with the media. Are you on Netflix all the time instead of living your potential, those kinds of things. You want to see what's in your way. And then that's your growth edge. And then you can look around the Enneagram if you know it really well, and you can say, oh, this Enneatype, when I first started getting on stages, I was petrified. Mm-hmm. I am not a good public speaker. And when I was younger, I know you wouldn't know it now.
I've seen you speak in person. I disagree, but go ahead.
But now I am. Now I am. People always say I am now, but I didn't, Carmen. When I was in 9th grade, I got on stage to do a skit and completely forgot my lines and burst into laughter when I was asked in church to say a prayer in front of a group of people. I said amen so quietly that they didn't hear me. And so when I got off the pulpit and was walking down back into the pews, everyone still had their heads bowed and their eyes closed. And, it was like, oh no.
They're like this.
I know. So, and I was just so attentive, so quiet. I was exuberant in high school, but I couldn't speak in front of more than 2 people without turning red. I had social anxiety disorder.
Okay.
So it wasn't until my son is an 8, great actor, and he can just command a stage. And one day I'd been asked to speak to a Chamber of Commerce meeting. It wasn't very big. And I was like a rabbit with a wolf in front of it. My heart was going and I was sweating and the introductions were happening. And I remember thinking, okay, how would Colin do this? And then I thought, okay, he's an 8 and I had just learned the Enneagram. If I lean into that 8, which I'm connected to, what would that feel like? Mm-hmm. So I got up and that's how I gave my talk, and I got a standing ovation. Wow. And, and I was funny and I was present. I was in my body, because remember, 8's are body, and I was embodied instead of out leaving my body, which is where I usually was when I got in front of people, because I was too worried about what they thought about me. It was such an ego thing, right? Yeah. Now I don't care. Right. I know I have a message, and if it's going to resonate with some, it's going to resonate with who needs it. And then others, I know that they'll find something that they need from someone else. It doesn't have to be me.
Oh, and I love that.
That's an evolution, right? And that's what the Enneagram's great for. Yes, so you just look and see where are you held tight and small, and then find the Enneatype that you need. So I have to lean into my 3 for achievement, to get out from behind the throne and actually present my own material, right?
Okay, yes.
But I had to do a lot of therapy to publish my dissertation in my doctoral program. It was unique, brand new science that I was presenting out in the scientific community. I was fully aware that the scientific community's job was to rip it apart, and I could not bear it. And so I had to do therapy and then go, okay, it's okay now. Right? When I published my book, it was the same thing. I had to say, okay, it doesn't matter what anyone thinks. This is your work. And if anyone's going to resonate with it, they will. And if they don't, they don't.
Yeah. So that's so, I mean, that's just freeing. I mean, I remember, and I tell this story a lot to my students about how when I was in 2nd grade, the teacher went to the bathroom, and I was finished with my work quickly, of course, and looking at it 25 times, it was perfect. And I was wandering the aisles when he came back in 2nd grade, teaching people how to do their work.
That's a
because
good one.
I didn't believe that they could do it themselves, you know? And when I use that story, I think, well, yes, I'm a teacher today. So, you know, it didn't necessarily was a terrible thing, but back then I already in second grade was establishing myself to think, well, it's got to be done perfectly. It's time now. Let's get to it and let me help you with that. I'll show you how to do it perfectly.
Right.
It's shown up throughout my whole life like that.
Uh-huh.
Crazy.
So some people are like that, and where it shows up really, hang on just a second. Sure. What? When? Oh, okay. So my office manager just came in and told me that they're going to test the alarm systems in our building in 5 minutes.
Okay, so, well, let's go ahead and let's wrap
close.
Up. Yeah. Yes. So let's close so we don't have all that craziness. But yes. last question here, Dr. Keesha, it seems like we're the same type from the same things. What are things that help you to be a healthy two?
Recognizing, again, the same thing, like where you're hung up, what the shadow is, and making friends with it, you guys. There's nothing good and there's nothing bad about the Enneagram. There's nothing good and nothing bad about your Enneatype. Everyone has a light and a shadow, and like the Cherokee say, whichever wolf you feed the most to grows the strongest. So if you feed your white wolf the most, but you can't look at the dark wolf and say it's bad and starve it to death either and kick it, because it will just be projected out onto other people, and your darkness that you don't like, you're going to see in everyone. Yes. And so your job is to make friends with your shadow, to integrate it, to dance with it, to love it, right? Yes. And to love the little child part of you that decided it was a good strategy and say, oh yeah, you're right, sweetie. It was at that time. But now, guess what? We have better skills. We have higher ordered tools. We've gone from the Bronze Age to the digital age. Mm-hmm. And we can actually do this a little bit better than you had to when you were 5. And so it's having compassion for that part of you. And if you judge it and you try to annihilate your ego and you try to rip it apart and try to run away from it, you know, it's just like Peter Pan in the shadow. You actually cannot get rid of your shadow. Right. And so you have to actually learn how to embrace it. And then it becomes part of the wholeness of you.
Yeah, I love that. And there's a movie called The Shadow. I think it's called The Shadow Effect or something like that, that I thought was just fascinating about the shadows of all of us. I mean, how no matter where you go and what you do, it's there. It's what you do with it. How do you learn to accept it? Yeah, and use it. Awesome. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your coaching program that you teach this in. And I want to talk to you about the training outside of all of this. I'm going to get in touch with you about something, but go ahead.
Okay.
Tell us about it.
So the Academy for Integrative Medicine Health Coach Certification Program, I teach this because I really think all people should know how to do this.
Oh my gosh.
And I also teach Ayurvedic medicine because it's a very whole, again, it's a whole system, and functional medicine, laboratory testing and protocols. And then the piece around trauma healing. And so I always believe that there's no true health and disease reversal unless you've dealt with the early traumas that every single person has. And again, it's not always going to be sexual and domestic violence and psychological, it's going to be those places where you felt traumatized in your childhood, and everybody has.
We've got to do another call on trauma, period, because it's the newest addition to what I teach my students too. But it's like you're the expert in it. I just think we could spend an hour talking about trauma in general. And I think it's that important. I truly do.
And I teach sexology. Yes. Because that's another piece that gets left behind. There's no other coaching program, that talks about functional sexology. Well, because I am the one that developed functional sexology. But the idea being that relationships also play a huge part in health. Especially for women. If you have unhealthy relationships, then you're going to have low vitality. Yeah. And that's low libido at the end of the day, and it creates hormone imbalances. And so that's another piece that I teach. So it's a very whole program.
Mm-hmm. What is the name of that book real quick before your things go off? You said the book that you recommend, I'm going to put all this in the replay, but it was a thin book and it was by
David Daniels.
David Daniels. Yeah. And what's it called?
Something, I don't remember the title, but it's Enneagram is in it. It's a little yellow book.
Okay. I'm going to grab that and put it in the replay. Then if you have any links you want to send to me, go ahead and send them my way, Keesha, and I'll make sure those go in the replay as well. And of course, you're getting all kinds of praise about this. This is a new topic for a lot of people. And one I think that you and I both can agree can be really super powerful for growth as people who are trying to reach more, optimal health for others in the world too. I mean, we got to be healthy and work on ourselves before we can do that with anyone else.
It's exactly right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to attract people to your practice that you're going to think are terrible to work with, but it's because you haven't really come up to your own place where you can attract others. So
that's right. That's right. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. So much for this. And I will be in touch with you. And we'll talk about some training I want to talk to you about. Okay. For the Institute, I want to plug in. All right. Thank you so much again. Thanks everybody.
Bye everybody. It was fun talking to you.
You too. Thanks.